Welcome back to Next Africa. I'm Jennifer Zabasajja in Johannesburg. Ever since joining Bill Gates and Warren Buffett's Giving Pledge in 2007, Sudanese-born billionaire and former tech mogul Mo Ibrahim has dedicated his time to his foundation, focused on encouraging better governance in Africa. This year's annual Ibrahim Governance Weekend brought together heads of state and business leaders to explore carving a more self-reliant way ahead for the continent. I sat down with Mo in a wide-ranging discussion to understand his thoughts on how to help finance a more sustainable path to growth.
We are in a tight corner in Africa, and I think the top priority in my mind, really, to sort this mess out is peace and security. If you look around you, you'll see that we now have more conflicts than any time in our history. Everywhere, we have so many conflicts. We are destroying the little we have. We're producing more refugees, more displaced people. And what development we are talking about, first, let's have peace. That is a prerequisite for any development or any movement forward. That's a big problem. Then, of course, we have the debt crisis. People borrowed too much money, and the interest rates in Africa is very high. And we find now that a lot of African countries is spending on interest payments more than they spend in education or health. Is that a recipe for development?
What do you want to see from the governments here on the continent to address some of these threats?
Good governance is a starting point. Until we have good governance and decent leadership, then we're going to always have problems. And you look at the top 5 or 10 countries in the index, and you see some governments are really doing well. You see Botswana is doing well, you see Mauritius is doing well, you see Namibia is doing well, you see even South Africa doing reasonably well, although they had their issues about state capture and other things. But we are 54 countries. So, you know, it doesn't mean that in the rest of countries we really are doing well. We are not doing well, frankly. And we need to be honest about this. And any improvement in Africa has to come from within Africa. So we are not overpopulated at all. We have a lot of resources, land resources, blue economy, you know, they have all these waters around us with all the richness. So we have also a good percentage of young people, which is important for any developing economy.
You also say, Mo, that the erosion of aid could potentially be a wake-up call. This could also dent governments' budgets by the hundreds of millions. It could set back progress made on illnesses. Why are you convinced that this won't set back any sort of progress?
This sudden action is painful, but let's look at numbers. All the US aid to Africa is less than 1% of the income of just 42 countries, not the 54 countries, less than 1%. So it's not a cliff edge. It is not a cliff edge. And in the larger scale of things, honestly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What we need to look at our own resources and deploy it. We have about $350 billion in sovereign funds and pension funds in Africa, which is mostly invested overseas. Why don't we invest it in Africa? And if we don't invest our money in Africa, do we expect foreigners to come and spend their money in Africa? Come on.
Mo, as somebody who made your billions working on the continent in many ways, you are a private businessman. What is the role of the private sector in helping the continent then achieve some of these goals that you're mentioning?
You cannot invest in a country where the rule of law is not good enough. We need to create the environment which attracts investment. That's upon us. Also, we having conversations with the rating agencies because the cost of capital in Africa is too high. And that is a great also problem which impedes investment in Africa because it costs 10%, maybe more, if you borrow in Africa as compared when you borrow in Europe or in US. So the cost of capital in Africa is quite high.
You had a very successful telecom business. I wonder, when you look at the telecom landscape on the continent and you think about connectivity and the role that that plays in economic growth, are you pleased with the state of the telecom industry, or do you think there should be more consolidation?
Actually, I think the telecom sector is doing very well. And I'm very pleased with the role we played in that. When nobody wanted to go into Africa and invest in telecom, and we went and we did it and became successful, and then everybody went to Africa. So telecommunication in Africa now is one of the bright spots. I mean, the percentage, things have changed now, but a few years ago, African usage of mobile phone was as a ratio compared to fixed lines was much higher than many countries in Europe. And Africa usage of mobile phones for payment system, we're ahead of everybody else. So a great environment was created there. So I'm quite happy with that. I don't think we need consolidation because competition is good for consumers.
I'd be remiss to not ask you about Sudan before we let you
Sure.
go. What's your outlook on the prospects for peace right now?
It's very bleak, to be honest, because what we see is two entrenched forces. Both of them came from the belly of the previous regime of Omar Bashir. These two generals fighting now were both Bashir generals, and it's a fight for power, for control, for wealth, or whatever. And it's a meaningless fight, and it just destroyed the whole country, inflicted huge amount of base. That conflict and its impact on the humans far exceed what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Gaza. Far exceeded. And of course, it's not in the news because maybe, I don't know, I don't want to say black lives matter less, maybe, I don't know. But it is not in the news.